Hi, everybody. Welcome to the virtual conference for the fall. I hope you're all enjoying your afternoon, maybe with a beverage of your choice. I am currently 5 months pregnant, so I'm in that forced sobriety phase of life. So please enjoy one for me as well. Just wanted to send a quick thanks to Andrew and the whole craft beer professionals community for letting me join you guys. I just think part of what I love about the craft beer industry is that we have a free conference like this that's made available and possible by sponsors. So shout out to Encompass Technologies, Gorman Smith Beverage Equipment, and then the awesome team that I get to work with here at Boelter. For those of you guys that maybe aren't familiar with Boelter, we are based just right outside of the Milwaukee area in Wisconsin. So family-owned company. We've been in the craft beverage and larger beverage space for decades, and we feel really comfortable in that area. A little bit about myself. I grew up as the child of some very avid craft beer fans and home brewers. Sierra Nevada Torpedo is my parents' fridge as long as I can remember going back. So I'm still an IPA drinker to this day, so I guess I come by it kind of honestly. I grew up just north of the Houston area in Texas, and then I went to college at University of Houston for any of you guys that are tuning in from Texas. I bartended at craft beer bars all the way through college and just really loved working in beer. And then after college, I got a job as a project manager at a digital marketing firm, and I just absolutely hated it. So I quit my job and gave myself a year to get a job with a brewery while I was studying for the GMAT. And in month 11, I was lucky enough to get a job offer from Real Ale Brewing in Blanco, Texas. So that kind of started my for real professional foray into the craft beer world on the brewery side. I started as a sales rep for the Houston market in 2015. And then I kind of worked my way in a bunch of different roles, managing South Texas. And then I moved up to Austin, Texas in 2018 and started managing the home market. As we all know, COVID hit. I think we all remember that. And I moved into more of a marketing role, which is what my degree was in. So I was managing things like distributor co-op budgets, social media, any sort of marketing programs, including like off-premise display programs, large-scale events at the brewery and in the community, stuff like that. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I never really wanted to do sales, and I swore that I would never do sales, but I think that the only thing I could ever see myself selling is beer or things related to beer. That being said, I'm very happy to live on the marketing side of Boelter now, but I do think that I have a pretty unique perspective, being that I was a customer of Boelter and I come from the brewery world. So I'm hoping to share some of that with you guys today in this presentation. So I think that we've all heard so much about how there's a lot of beer out there. I think if I have to hear how crowded the market is one more time, I'm probably going to pull my hair out. But the reality is that beer drinkers are buying so much more than just your beer, right? So beer is part of the equation, but they're really buying why you do it. And I feel like this quote from Simon Sinek, who I'm a classic like millennial marketing fangirl of, I think it really encapsulates that. So I kind of wanted to kick that off. We're going to talk a little bit about why you do what you do and how your custom merch strategy can kind of further your why. So I'm going to start with talking about kind of the elements of a craft brewery experience. I don't think this will be this will be new to any of you guys, but I just kind of wanted to set the stage. So obviously the first and foremost part is the beer, right? So I feel like the beer that I buy on a regular basis kind of represents quality, consistency. The worst thing I think is whenever I feel like I break out and try a new beer and it's not as good as like my daily fridge drinker. That's so disappointing to me. So I really feel like consistency is super important. Value, I think, is really important. You know, I would love to just be able to buy $25 4-packs every day, but that's not something that's in my budget. If it's in yours, then I think you're living your best life. And then innovation, right? Like I think I'm also at a point in my life where I mostly drink IPAs. I'm probably one of the hated drinkers for some brewers out there. But I do appreciate a new IPA every now and then. I don't like to drink the same exact thing every day. And then I'm putting this category in just vibes, right? So like, is your tap room and your beer garden a fun place to hang out? Do people want to go there regardless of who you're trying to target? If you're family friendly, if you're dog friendly, if you're close to a sports arena, whatever you're trying to do, I think that we all have been to breweries where we feel like something is maybe just missing. And you want to make sure that your brewery is a place that people want to go if they're a beer fan or if they're not, honestly. Food, super important when people are drinking alcohol. So what kind of options do you have, either on site or super easily accessible through delivery or food truck or whatever? People are part of the equation, right? So is your team welcoming? And I mean, not just your taproom staff, but your brewers, your packaging team, whoever's interacting with your guests at any part, whether that's through your tour or if they're having a shift beer when they get off in the tap room. I think it's important that everyone that represents the brewery is super welcoming to anyone coming in. Obviously your swag, which is what we're here to talk about today. So I don't think the coolest thing about your merch should be the fact that it has a brewery logo on it. I think that it's really important that people inherently want to wear, whether that's apparel or they want to drink out of a cool glass or they want to, whatever the item is, they want that. And the fact that it has your logo on it is just kind of extra bonus for you, right? And then events. So are you doing things on site or around the community that make people create a positive association with your brewery? Okay, so kind of expanding on that a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about matching your merch to your mission. So I think depending on what your goal is for your brewery, you might gear your merch strategy in a different kind of way, right? So I've given some examples here. This is not all of the different things that you might think about, or your particular brewery strategy might not be on here. That's okay. Just wanted to provide some examples as a frame of reference of the kind of ways that we think about merch strategy at Boelter. So distribution. Are you sending your beer out into the world for people to buy on and off premise? If you are, you're probably thinking about things like signage. What's really great about signage is that it's a multi-purpose piece. So it can live out in the trade in an on-premise account, and it can also be used as a display enhancer. Things like coasters and barware are also really great because they also serve a dual purpose, right? They can be used by your rep team, and they can also be used by on-premise like key accounts if they want to represent your brand in that way. Versus if you're a brew pub and you're really trying to sell maybe as much as you can through your front door, your strategy is going to be a little bit different, right? So you're using more experience-driven pieces. These can be more premium even if you're selling them through your own tap room. But like I mentioned before, I think it's really ultimately super important that you are creating something that you would want to wear or use and not just selling it because it has a brewery lockup on it, Fun fact, these two people are members of my team. So Andrew in the Toppling Goliath Hawaiian shirt is our e-commerce guru. And then Nicole is our newest beverage marketing coordinator in the Denver beer shirt. So if you ever are looking for a side hustle as a beer model, please reach out to your girl, always hiring. And then last example I wanted to give is event driven. So this is a picture that I stole from my days at Real Ale. This is Kenny. He now works for Jester King, for those of you Texas people. If you're doing events, right, if you're doing things on site or out in the community, you're looking for things that are really recognizable and easily brandable. Things like tents, canopies. You're also looking for giveaways. So obviously the laws vary by state, and Texas has to be under $1 for you to give it away. So you want to make sure that you're adhering to those. We're not looking to get anybody in trouble. And then cups. So we've seen a huge trend towards sustainability in the last few years. I think that it's kind of one of those buzzwords that everybody is excited to incorporate into their brewery, which is great. We also have seen a move away from single-use plastics. So we do still do a lot of just straight up PET cups that are customizable. But we're also seeing more like custom ball aluminum cups and things that maybe souvenir cups, things that could be used more than just single use. So that's kind of something interesting. Okay, so now we're going to segue into talking about just kind of the craft beer product mix for your average craft brewery. So the way that we've compiled this data, we've taken an aggregate of all of our craft customers and I've done my best to kind of summarize that for you guys. So just for some quick kind of recap, maybe the terminology that we use here is not what you use at your brewery. So we're going to use these product categories through the rest of this presentation. So I just want to make sure that we're really all on the same page about that. Cups include things that I just talked about, right? Disposable plastic cups, also souvenir cups. Souvenir cups are things that you would see at a baseball game or really anything that you could theoretically put in a dishwasher and use again. Signage, for our purposes, we talk about standard things, right? Like LEDs, neons, tin tackers. This also includes cardboard display enhancers. So think like case risers, case stackers, and then umbrellas are part of signage in our world as well. Barware is going to be any on-premise essentials. So bar and rail mats, pitchers, trays, caddies, buckets, stuff like that. And then lastly, promotional. So apparel, we do a lot of pet gear. We do tons of coolies, openers, anything like that. So the smallest section that you see on here that's not labeled is going to be promotional. So you can see, I don't think, again, most of this probably will not be surprising. Glassware is a huge part of what we do here at Boelter. It's also a huge part of just any brewery's custom merch portfolio. I mentioned we do a lot of cups. The one thing that was maybe a little bit surprising to me was buckets. I think that I came from a brewery that did use buckets as part of our lineup, but I know a lot of breweries don't. So we have options kind of for everyone. This does include the standard like metal buckets that you're thinking of, but also plastic and some other lower cost options. So okay, so I want to talk next about, I think maybe it's a popular question of, well, if my brewery is this size, then how large should my POS budget be, right? And I think it does kind of depend a little bit on what you're trying to do. If you're doing things like distribution, you likely have some sort of co-op budget with your distributor where your money gets multiplied. If you're doing things, you're a smaller brewery and you're trying to sell as much as you can out of your front door, your budget might be a little bit different and your goals would be a little bit different, right? But just to kind of set the stage for what we're going to talk about here, I wanted to show some data from the Brewers Association. So there are 7,300 total breweries that report production volume in the latest Brewers Association report. This pictogram specifically talks about the 1,600 breweries that have a volume of 3,000 barrels or more. There are 1,800 breweries roughly that have a production volume of 1,000 barrels or more. So you can kind of fit yourself in there where you will. We're going to talk about 4 different customer examples today. I've removed the actual customer name just to respect the privacy and some of the confidentiality stuff. But hopefully what you see in the next few slides will resonate with you no matter what your size is. We are going to be talking about, in our examples, breweries that are 30,000 barrels and above. So they'll be on the higher side of this, which you can see overall, like not a ton of those breweries. We start to see it grow a little bit more as we get into the smaller production volumes. Okay, so the first customer we're going to look at, what I've done is I've taken those product categories that we talked about a couple slides ago. So signage, tap handles, coolers, glassware, cups, and coasters, which I would say are kind of the focus product categories for Boelter, and that's what we sell the most of. That's what we get requests from breweries for the most part. We do other things, like I mentioned, like giveaways, apparel. You'll see some examples of some product in here that you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know I could put my logo on that. But our bread and butter is really in these 6 categories. And I think that that's pretty representative of the average craft beer merch portfolio. So you can see signage makes up a huge part of what they do. I think that I mentioned, signage is so great because it can be used on and off premise accounts. This particular customer has a really large network of distributors with national distribution. They spend across their portfolio, but it's really focused on 2 or 3 brands, meaning the majority of their custom merch is supporting 2 or 3 of the, multiple brands in their portfolio. The next category that's not included in this chart that they do also have a significant spend on is giveaways, namely Kyley's is a big thing for them. And then just to put it in some context, this represents over $2 million in annual spend. So this is arguably probably one of the largest largest POS budgets for a craft brewery in the country, I would say. So let's talk about some examples of what that looks like, right? So on here, I've included some examples from breweries of this size or of this type, right? So what you're seeing here is you're seeing a lot of off-premise display pieces. So you're seeing some really, really cool, like out-of-the-box display enhancers. This is a stand-up paddleboard that we did for Shiner. This is a custom gator-shaped cooler that Cigar City did for Florida Man. Just some really cool stuff. This is part of what I love about my job is getting requests like this from customers and thinking like, oh my God, I never in a million years would I have thought of like an alligator shaped cooler where the back opens up and I can pull a beer out of it. But cool, like let's figure out how to do it. So you're also seeing case risers and case stackers, but sometimes they have like this custom kind of add-on shape. We see lots of those. We also see a lot of things like base wrap and maybe some things that you would see in big beer that we're starting to see some of these larger craft brands also co-op and use, which I think is great. Excuse me. As far as signage, we see really high-end signage, right? So custom shaped LEDs, neons, and then we're starting to see more leons. That's what they call it. So it's a faux neon that's made from LED. It's a little bit more durable, a little bit more affordable. So that's kind of a cool option. When we see coolers, we're seeing like really top of the line stuff, right? Yeti, this is a Coleman 54 quart, Grizzly. We're seeing full wrap, really cool graphics. And again, like these are used in the trade for display enhancers. They're also used for rep events, social media giveaways, things like that. When we see umbrellas, we see custom PMS colors. Sometimes we see printing underneath the umbrella, which is a really nice touch. And then we see fully custom tap handles, right? So a lot of times you'll see a different shape or different style of tap handle for each brand in their portfolio. We see more standard glassware styles. So you can imagine since they're doing a lot of distributor events, stackable is really important. So we see a lot of pints. We see some can shaped. You can see this one from New Belgium. This has a metallic print on it. So they do try to, I think, elevate kind of these standard glassware shapes where they can. But for the most part, we're not seeing any like crazy Belgians or any strange shaped glassware. Lots of disposable cups here. So typically like a 16, 18 ounce cup for events and then a smaller size cup for sampling. And then lastly, we do see some custom shaped coasters like this Oscar Blues badge down here. We do still see like standard medium weight 4-inch round and square. But if we're going to see custom shapes, it's usually in this market segment. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit different customer next. So this is a little bit lower overall POS budget. So this is under $1 million in annual POS spend, but roughly the same bracket of production volume, right? So we're still over 100,000 barrels. We're still a nationally distributed craft brand here. You can see how different the split is here though. Signage is still a big player, but it's gotten bigger in the last couple of years, right? Tap handles are huge. Glassware plays a bigger role. I did note here, this particular customer has acquired some additional brands in the past year, which does account for some of the increase in 2023 that you see. But similar to the last one that we saw, other large spend categories include giveaways, and then they also do quite a bit of apparel here. So let's look at some product examples to talk about some of the differences here, and I'll highlight a few things that are different that I noticed, right? So here you're still seeing case stackers and risers, but they're overall less custom. This is a standard shape case stacker. The topper is pretty standard. That's not to say that we don't see custom shapes here, but we start to edge more towards standard. We see more buckets in this space, usually full color, full wrap metal buckets, which is what you see with that Montauk one below. Signage is still really big, but it may be like a slightly lower cost. So this is a standard shape, this Alaskan Pilsner one. This is a standard shape versus like the fully custom one that we saw in the Shiner barbecue example on a few slides ago. We also see some mid-tier cooler options, right? So I love this vintage looking cooler. It is quite a bit less expensive than something like a Coleman or a Yeti or a Grizzly. So we see more of that. I would say we also see more just like fun new ideas. So outside of display pieces, so custom solo stoves, this is pickleball stuff, these wearable cans I'm obsessed with. I wish I could get my hands on one for Halloween. So some cool stuff like that. I mentioned the giveaways here, right? Coolies, bar blades, stuff that you would expect to see. We see some bar and rail mats. Sometimes they have custom nibs, meaning like the little tiny parts that are in there. We see those sometimes in like can shapes or state shapes or stuff like that. Or they could be custom shaped. This is a standard shape rail mat. But we see some custom shaped ones too. And then lastly, tap handles, right? So there'll be some custom components, but they're usually not fully custom in this segment. So by custom components, I mean like this is a laser cut wood with like a backer, like a card that slides in, but the shape overall is a lot more of a standard shape. Okay. Now we're kind of moving into the next large category of customer, right? So this is kind of one step down as far as production. This is just right over 30,000 barrels, and this is more what we would call like a regional craft. They have around $300,000 in annual POS spend. So signage is, again, really big. I feel like I'm just kind of like beating a dead horse there, but we do really see just a ton of signage happening. And like I said, I think it's because it is so dual purpose. It can be used in so many different ways on site, key accounts on draft, display enhancers, whatever it is. And there are also so many different types of signage, right? At different price points, umbrellas, LEDs, chalkboard signage, whatever you're looking for. So we see a lot of signage. This particular customer is balanced between multi-state distribution, but they also have a really strong presence as a destination brewery. So there is an on-site component that we see for them as well. So we see tap handles have a bigger play. They use a lot of the signage that they buy for the trade. They also use on site, stuff like that. And then I did just add a note here. Their overall spend in 2021 was larger. They significantly expanded their distribution footprint post-COVID. So let's look at some of these products, right? So we'll still see signage, but as I mentioned, it might be a little bit more affordable. So we're seeing things like tin tackers as opposed to maybe like neons or fully custom LEDs, stuff like that. Can shape tackers are super popular. I think this ranch water one is still a custom shaped tacker, but really fun and pretty small, so pretty affordable. We see lots of glassware here, right? So we start to see more unique art, I would say. This pint glass from Fulton is full color, full wrap, super cool design. We see more of that. I think that the overall volume of glassware that they're sending to distributors is smaller. So they're able to be more nimble, right? They're able to do shorter run, lower MOQ, cool stuff that they can sell in their tap room, and they can also send out to the trade or use for their rep team or whatever. Apparel plays a larger part in this space, although it is mostly premium. So we see things, like Patagonia, North Face, stuff like that. If we're seeing t-shirts, we're seeing like the t-shirts you actually really want to wear, like the soft ones. I won't name names. We're not seeing like the freebies that you get when you donate blood, although it's very important to donate blood. We're seeing, again, coolers that are just more beer drinker facing, I would say, than distributor facing. So I included this example from Kanga for Golden Road, stuff like this. That's more like you would take it to your backyard barbecue. It's less about putting it on a display in a grocery store. We see umbrellas, but they're maybe more basic umbrellas, right? We see just like a one color print on a standard PMS shade here. So a little bit more affordable. And then same thing with the tap handles. Sometimes they're custom still for each flagship brand, meaning like in the case of Austin East Ciders, their color changes. This is their Pride handle, but the shape is standard across the portfolio. So variations on that would be, right, like you have a card that goes in or a sticker that goes on, but the shape of the handle stays the same and can be swapped out. We also see usually one or two big display programs or enhancers per year. So here I've included this cool foldable custom chair from Noda Brewing, and then the Pseudo Sue snowboard, which is still one of my favorite pieces to date. I think it's super cool. Okay, and then we're going to talk about our last customer example here. This is a regional craft brewery still, but they're really only distributed to 3 states, and the majority of their volume is sold in their home state. So they're still doing quite a bit of volume in that home state. You can see 30,000 barrels plus. But they're super hospitality driven. They have a large focus on tap room and on-site events. And then this represents, just over $100,000 in annual spend. So I've broken this out a little bit differently because we haven't worked with this customer for quite as long. So I don't have the historic data that I have for the other ones. But you can see it's a similar representation here, right? Glassware plays a big part. Signage plays a huge part. And cups and giveaways are still really important to them too. I would say giveaways are more important than maybe some of the other ones we've seen, just because they are so hospitality driven and they're focused on their home market. So we can look at some examples of product for that, right? We're seeing buckets, but we're seeing more like one color, one location. We're seeing really cool, fully custom short run apparel. So I love this camp shirt from Noda. We're seeing different styles of glassware with just like super cool art, right? So this is a zombie glass that I've seen co-op more for the beer space. Historically, we've seen it more for spirits and cocktails, but this Logic Bomb art from Surly is fantastic. We also see, I included this Belgian style from Carbon 4. So we're seeing kind of breaking out from your traditional pints here and Willie Beckers and seeing more like Cedras and Nonix and just kind of cool glassware shapes, which is fun for me because I'm a huge glassware nerd and I love to look at stuff like that. We see standard shape tap handles. So this is a 4-sided handle for 8 lager. It's one of our house shapes. We do a lot of these, very affordable. So we see stuff more like that. We see lower cost signage. So this 3 Sheeps, this is a wood sign that I love this substrate. I think it's a little bit more durable than tin tackers. Or we see very standard shaped tin tackers, right? Like this is a standard circle round tin tacker. We see more premium drinkware in this space because they are doing so much out of their tap room, right? So hydro flasks, Mir, Stanleys, Yetis, stuff like that. They're not necessarily popping for like the Yeti cooler that we saw in the first customer example, but they still have a taste for premium and they're trying to work it into their budget where they can. We also see pieces that can be used in the tap room and in the trade. So this Silver City bar mat gets used in their tap room, but it's also available for them to share with key accounts. Same thing with Highlands chalkboard sign, right? They use that outside, but they also can offer it to distributors if and when. So it's kind of an overview of some different customer examples. We're lucky enough to work with a ton of different size customers at Boelter, and that's something that I love. I think that it would get pretty boring if we saw the same stuff every day. So I wanted to share some of the cool stuff that we've seen with customers lately. If you guys have any questions about, the right merch for your brewery, or I'm really stuck on how to achieve this, that's part of what our team really loves doing at Boelter. So whether you're just looking for an idea or some help with something, I really encourage you to reach out, as well as if you had any questions about this presentation. I think at the end of the day, everyone here is really a beer lover, so we're less concerned about if it turns into a sale and more concerned about just helping the community, especially our friends at CBP. So thank you guys so much for the time. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the rest of the virtual conference.